Hi everyone. So for the lab tonight, we're going to work on pen weights. So I'm hoping by now, or at least by a little later this week, you've got your different pen weights. I generally work with these four. I put them in order of thickness, line thickness. I have my Sharpie, which is generally the thickest line that I use day to day. I do keep a magic marker that's thicker for rare occasions. I have my sign pen. I've got my stylist or razor point. Those are about the same. And then I have my very, very fine micron for fine work. So these are the four that I use day to day, and they've worked well for me over the years, and they're easy to replace. And so we're just going to go through a little exercise. So if you print out the lab assignment on pen weights, 8.5 by 11 is fine. We're literally just going to trace over the lines and then add some graphic plant material into the little landscape area. So we're looking at a plan view drawing. You can see the roof of the house, some landscape area. There's these features that are planters, or they could be pools. And we're going to focus on black and white line drawing. And by changing our pen weights, it starts to add a three-dimensional kind of quality to this layout. So, and that's the trick, trying to get something to look three-dimensional when it's really two-dimensional. So we're going to start with our thickest lines, and that is we use the Sharpie for that. And generally, we're going to use our thick lines for items that are up tallest in the sky. So we'll say thick lines, Sharpie. Generally, we're going to use this for buildings. We're going to use this for trees or anything else that's tall and up high in the air. So on this particular example, we're going to do only the outline of the roof in Sharpie. So I've got a little rolling glider as my straight edge, but you guys might have a T-bar or even a small parallel bar. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm really just tracing over the line. And so my goal is to just kind of give this flat line drawing some more dimension to it. So I tend to pick up all the lines in one direction, and then I'm going to rotate my edge. If you have a rolling rider, this is the way that you would do it. If you're working with a T-bar, then you would do it like this. And you would have your parallel edge lined up, and you would take your triangle and use that for your vertical edge. So if we were in the classroom and we have parallel bars, this is the way that we would make those parallel lines. And you'll notice I have a clipboard where I've attached the drawing, but usually we would attach it in a real drafting situation with like the drafting dots or the drafting tape. So I've just kind of got a nice thick outline on my house. I'm going to make it, missed a couple lines here, so we want to make sure we get the entire thing. Okay, and one item down. Now I'm going to add a tree. Actually, I'm going to add a couple trees to my composition. So I didn't give you a scale on this, but since we talked about scaling tonight, say if this was an 1/8 of an inch scale plan, I might measure my tree or my circle to have a certain diameter. So if I'm measuring my trees, here I'm measuring it 1/8 of an inch. I'm assuming it's 1/8 of an inch. Here I'd have about a 14-foot diameter. Here's about a 15-foot diameter tree. That's a nice sized tree for kind of a small scale residential project like this. Now I I'm going to just pencil this in. This is a good use for my non-photo blue pencil. So I'm going to add a tree right in this corner. With trees, we normally like to mark the center, so you can see the crosshairs on that. And I'm just going to put a guideline in. So there's one 15-foot tree. Maybe I'm going to put another one over in here. One in the front yard. And I'm just penciling them in at this point. Overlap it a bit, marking the center because that's always easier to see with the circle template. So I've got a couple trees. Maybe I'm going to add one more over here. And another, I'm just roughing it in with a pencil or non-photo blue. Mark that center again. And I'm going to skip it for now. I will come back and make those darker, but I want to get some of the understory in below. So these, to me, are kind of freestanding walls. So I make those my next lightest pen weight. I'm going to say this will be a medium. This is my sign pen. And I'm going to use the same technique. Now I have a gliding ruler, so I'm going to continue to use that. But if you've got a T-bar, that actually keeps a better edge than the gliding rulers tend to be pretty unstable. So I'm just going to go through and darken these lines. And I tend to do them in, parallel lines. So if you had a little small drafting table, you would use this method and then add your vertical edge like this triangle mounted on it. With the gliding ruler, I could also twist it. So I'm going to, for the sake of efficiency and not having the video be so long, I'm going to twist my gliding ruler in these demos. So I've now made these stand out a little bit more. They read a little bit higher in elevation than they did before. For the edge of hardscape, I'm going to use my stylus pen. So we'll call this kind of my light pen weight. If I wanted to get really detailed, I could take one of my small circle templates and go over these curves to make it really nice and straight. I do want you to practice not freehanding. A lot of the sketching exercises are going to give you some pretty good hand-eye coordination by the end of the semester. We want, when we're drafting, we want this to be real crisp lines. So I am just kind of adding lines across what's already drawn. So I'm not changing the design at this point. This is really just tracing with the different pen weights. We'll get some areas where you can customize your little landscape in a minute. But for now, I'm really just trying to set those pen weights. So I'm doing the edge of hardscape and the stairs, which are kind of these light, one of our lighter pen weights. They're low. Think about things that are high in the ground should be thick. Things that are lower in the ground should be thin. I'm going to go along the sidewalk too and darken that because that's an edge of hardscape. It should read a little bit darker than the scoring patterns within the paving. Once again, if I wanted to really make a nice tight circle, I would roll through these arcs and find the circle that fits that arc really well. About that size. I could go in, really make a nice clean circle there. About the right. And cleanly draw your lines. So I'm going to take a minute and just see the edge of the driveway here. I'm also going to go over this roof with this thin pen. So around the perimeter, we want a nice dark detail, but as we fill in fine detail on the roof, then we make that lighter. Using these straight edges to get myself a nice, crisp line. And we'll say with our medium sign pen, we did the walls. We'll also do medium-sized shrubs would be in that pen weight. Light, which for me is a stylist. We're going to do the edge of hardscape. We'll probably do some of the ground cover and small shrubs. And then for this lightest pen weight, this for me is the micron, so we'll say extra light. This is going to be fine detail. That's the micron. And this is going to be for paving, scoring, paving detail, maybe some ground covers. So think, the higher it is in elevation, the thicker line you're going to use. As you get down to what's on the ground plane, you start moving into this very, very light pen weight. So you can see that I've kind of outlined just the base that I was giving, and everything is kind of a little bit more readable now. So I'm going to start maybe enhancing the paving. So in week 1 or class 1, I uploaded a graphics reference for you, and that was from Cal Poly Pomona. And it's got a lot of different hatches and textures, so you can use that as a reference. You don't have to copy what I'm doing, but I'm going to kind of create a nice little, almost like a stone like a flagstone pattern in here. And I'm using this very, very lightest pen weight so that I don't overwhelm the detail. There's a tendency to draw with a thicker pen, and then it just really reads as the most prominent thing on the plan. So we want this to really stay in the kind of background and not grab attention away from some of the taller items. That's what's going to give us the dimension, the end dimension, and the 3D kind of effect of this pen weights technique. So I'm just filling in kind of a random flagstone pattern. This is one of the ways that it's kind of an irregular pattern. I'm just kind of filling in the voids with these little oblong shapes. But you could do brick, you could do all kinds of different patterns in there. You could do a simple concrete. We'll look at that for the driveway. I'm doing kind of a quick job so we don't have a multiple huge long video here tonight, that you can certainly take more time if you want. So now I have a little area where it's kind of washed out on my screen, but hopefully you can see it a little bit better when this converts to a video. I'm also going to put some stone banding in my driveway, just to add some interest to that so that it's not so boring and just concrete. So I'm going to use that same pen weight, and I'm just going to create some bands of paving. Maybe this is just a stone accents in there. A little flare. Put the same kind of pattern in there. Have a little interest in this landscape. Again, that booklet should have a number of different hatch kind of paving patterns for you to choose from. I'm also going to put some score lines. So if we have concrete, we generally have kind of these score lines and expansion joints. So I'm just going to score this paving. And again, I'm using that very lightest pen weight. I'm just creating some interest or texture on that paving to not make it not look so plain and boring. You can see that I don't have the best resolution up there. For concrete, one of the things I like to do is just a light stipple. And I tend to load those stipples around the edges. Just kind of an irregular stipple. Gives a little texture to the concrete. I'm going to put some stone on the steps. See if I can get that to read a little bit better. You can start to see that detail on there. That really, really light micron really is a nice one for getting that fine detail work in there, not overwhelming the rendering. And hopefully you can see a little bit of stippling when we get done. Let's add some hatch on. I'm going to say that this area over here is going to be lawn. So I just tend to create a little edge hatch around lawn. Now, for a lot of our finished plans, we go through the step of rendering or coloring, but sometimes we don't have time or we're doing a really quick informal first pass. In that case, that's where these pen weights and graphics really come into play. Because with rendering, once you start rendering, you have to finish it or it looks terrible. So sometimes you just have run out of time and you need your black and white graphics to read in a three-dimensional manner. So this is how we do it with varying our pen weights. It also helps our rendered plans look better. But if we know we're going to render, we maybe don't put as much detail into some of the trees that we might do in just black and white graphics. And I'm just doing some little, it's almost like an earth kind of a hatch where do 3 little strikes. Can get it to focus in, and just around the edge, you can see a little bit. I'm just doing a very light kind of 3 hatches to give it a little bit of texture. And I'm calling this my lawn area. And I mostly focus my hatching along the edges of the perimeter planting area. And that's because I don't want to overwhelm I don't want to make the part that is close to the ground overwhelming and compete with some of the things that are taller. And then for this is going to be a very quick, easy ground cover. I'm taking my my stylus or my razor point, and I'm just kind of creating a squiggle, which is an outline of ground cover around this area. Defining the edge. Work on the trees a little bit. So with trees, there's a bunch of different tree symbols that you can use. I'm going to start with, again, creating a heavy circle around the edge, and maybe I might create, if you're not feeling comfortable freehand, you can go ahead and use your circle template on some of them. Some of them are more of a freehand variety. For the detail on trees, I tend to use a little bit lighter of a pen weight. So I might use this, create a bit of movement in my tree. Again, around the edge, I'm using that thickest pen weight. It's okay if I'm drawing right over line work below. It all ends up layered looking and it reads through well anyway. You don't need to worry about that. So these are going to be kind of a flowering accent tree. Maybe this one I will make an evergreen tree. So really easy evergreen is just to kind of do like a a regular shape around it. Does not have to be perfect. Now I'm going to put some shrubs in my planter. Again, this is where your non-photo blue or just your basic pencil might work well for you. Just going to sketch a few kind of medium-sized shrubs in here along this bigger area. The row right here, screen shrubs. Maybe with these, I want to kind of have a drift of them together. So what I've done is created my blue outline. I dot the middle for each one so that I can count them at the end of the day. And just make these little cloud shapes. Real easy, simple shrub symbol. As I've gotten older, I've learned to simplify my graphics in some ways because a lot of times we'll end up rendering over the top. And if we're rendering over the top, we kind of lose the detail anyway. How to render water is always something that people find a challenge. So you could, in your own drawing, make these into little planters, like raised planters, like vegetable beds in the front yard. I'm going to make them water because I know that a lot of people ask me that question of how to draw water. And there's a couple ways. So one way is to kind of create a still pond of water. And so we would start with an area, maybe here. I'm just going to create a center dot. And then I'm going to take a circle template, but only not do a full circle. I'm using that pretty light pen weight, my stylus, to do that. So, and then I'm going to take bigger circles and just do, again, partial circle patterns. So it's like, ripples in a pond coming out from there. Different sizes. They don't have to all be equally spaced. Trying to line up the center on each one, trying not to go past where my walls are. Maybe I'll put a little small, tiny one in the middle here. I start getting this kind of pond ripple effect coming in. See if I can focus this a little bit better. It doesn't really want us to try. You can start seeing how this is starting to get some life and dimension a little bit in it, with the paving patterns being low to the ground. We got some circles of water coming there. My big circle. So that's one way to make water. You can almost make rings of water in there. The other one is a technique where you just kind of take your pen and let it almost drag across the paper. Kind of pull it, and there's kind of a movement of water, usually from one corner. Sometimes they crisscross. It starts to kind of have a movement effect. And we'll talk about rendering techniques with water. That is one of the best things to render with our colored markers. So now we've got a landscape that's starting to really lift off the page. And now we want to just focus on this roof line. So if we think about the way sun hits items, we usually have a north arrow on our plan. So if my north arrow looked like this direction, it would mean the sun is going across the roof And that these edges would be in full sunlight, and this whole edge would be in shade. And same with the trees. This would be fully light, and this would be in shade. This would be in shade, and all of these. So we can give our items further dimension by starting to shade or add extra line weight on the shady side. So it just gives a little bit more dimension. These particular trees, I'm going to leave alone because that particular symbol doesn't lend itself well to be shaded like that. It's a good one to render with colors. But these little shrubs, I'm just going to darken the shady side. And same with this. I'm going to darken this tree symbol a little bit on the shady side. Just adding some texture in there. I might add a little bit around the base, but this is going to be the brightest part of my tree. And then this other side is going to be in shadow. And when things are in shadow, we tend to find more detail. So we're going to do the same thing with the roof. I'm going to take my stylist, which is one of my thin ones, and I'm going to start with this part of the roof that is in full sun. I've got two panels here that are just going to be in blasting sun. And what that means is it kind of washes out the detail. So I'm going to create these little lines that are pretty far apart. So not a lot of detail when it's in full sun. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm keeping the lines pretty spaced wide. Just creating a little bit of texture on that roof. Like that. So you can see just a few lines in there. Now I'm going to go to the dark side of the roof, the one that's in shadow. It's going to follow these shrubs and the trees. And so we've got our brightest part. Now I'm going to go to the darkest part, and I'm going to put a lot more lines in there. This is going to have about double the amount of lines. Or maybe even triple. I like to keep a little break between the lines, not do a full line between, just kind of rest the eye. I found that when I do full lines across, it gets a little overwhelming. I can get that to focus in. So you can start seeing the areas that are in sun. I don't have a lot of lines defining them. And then the area that's in shade is going to have probably 3 times as many lines per area. So brightest full sun side, dark sun side, and then these kind of fall between them. So they won't be as closely spaced as in on the shady side, but more than the sunny side. Okay, and then the same with this little panel over here. Again, I'm always kind of paralleling the lower edge of the roof. So these are the sides that are like partial shade, partial sun. So now we have a roof that hopefully looks like it's starting to have some depth to it and starting to articulate a little bit. So that is the goal there. And I think that's pretty much it for this pen weight exercise. Hopefully the video shows a bit more of that depth than is showing on my screen, but hopefully that tutorial helps you and you will have good success on your lab tonight. All right, and then feel free to, create little elements. You create pathways. You don't have to make lawns. You don't have to make water. You can make those raised vegetable beds. You can put more trees in or less trees in. So feel free to kind of start playing with those graphics and design a little landscape that you love. All right, and we will see you next time.